Hello, everybody. It is it's great to be with you this morning, and I really appreciate what Governor Holcomb just said about sort of leveraging the investment of Ready. You know, so many quality of place investments are being made, but it's been a struggle to try to figure out how exactly we can provide a revenue source for our local governments to attract talent. And I think Senate Bill 361 is a huge step in that direction. My name is Adam Berry. I'm Vice President of Economic Development and Technology at the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. And you're going to hear a lot about sort of the need or sort of why this bill is important, but the how the bill passed is a story that's really only known to a few people in this room. But I think that it's really my favorite part of the job that I have at the Indiana Chamber is working with our stakeholders to identify really good ideas and then sort of using my entrepreneurial spirit to turn those ideas into something tangible, and in this case, a piece of legislation. A few people who helped along the way to make this bill a reality, who I'd like to just say a quick thank you. Mike and Ben from the MakeMyMove team for really capturing and allowing us to use empirical data along the way. I mean, it's so valuable to sort of convince legislators of a good idea if you have data that backs that up. Alicia and Ann from Purdue, Mayor Marsh, Mayor Ridenour for their input along the way, Bill Osterly, as he said, the bill author, Senator Holdman, and the sponsor, Representative Carball, and really that leadership from both the House and the Senate who identified, this bill actually started out as Senate Bill 4. And so those who know, anything sort of in the top 8 of the bill numbers is identified as a priority piece of legislation. Kevin, my boss, and John Thompson, who's the chair of the Indiana Board of Directors, for really sort of raising the priority and the elevating this bill as a priority for the Chamber of Commerce. And last but not least, the spouse of our next presenter, Luke Messer, who offered a lot of great insight and advocacy along the way. So my job up here is to introduce Jennifer Messer, who has over 20 years of local legal experience as an attorney. What's unique about Jennifer and what's compelling is that she has an equal focus on economic development as much as she does sort of municipal law, getting into the weeds. What's interesting, also interesting about Jennifer, is that she was a remote worker before remote working was cool. She was a remote worker working in DC, and has proven that being a remote worker still have a lot of success. So with that, if you wouldn't mind helping me introduce, or welcome rather, one of the state's foremost experts on local government finance, Jennifer Messer.
Good morning. How is everyone? It feels like Monday, but it's kind of cool, right? You wake up, you're ready to go, ready to sit here. What I promise you this is I'll try very much not to get into every weed of municipal law, because whether it's been a great start or not, I won't keep you for long. I get that. But I am excited to be here. I think this law is a really, really big deal. And I don't want to sound like a cheerleader so much, but I do want to say this. In my 20 years of practice, I have never seen a piece of legislation that applies to municipalities that is truly this home rule focused. I've also never seen a piece of legislation that is all encompassing. It really, I would suggest to everyone in this room, whether you're from Rensselaer or Lawrenceburg or Greensburg or Indianapolis, or pick your community, this legislation, this new law applies to you. It just does. It can be used by everyone. And as you've already heard today, it really does matter. We all know it. We feel it. The workplace has changed dramatically. It was edging that way. Technology was bringing us to a very different workplace. COVID hit the accelerator, right? Remote workers, as you heard John Thompson mention, you've heard Mike, and you're going to hear our other panelists, they are, without doubt, here to stay. So Forbes has reported by the end of this year, 2022, 25% of professional workers will be remote. Think about that for a minute. Think about what it does to the economy and how these people, I love the word or the phrase that Mike uses, they're like free agents. They can go anywhere, they can live anywhere. I've seen it in my life. If you have a computer in many professional jobs, you now are in charge of picking your location where you're doing your job, regardless of where your employer is located. So as we are hopefully edging our way out of COVID, what happens then, right? Well, remote workers, as I started, they're still here to stay. 61% have reported that they choose not to go back into their workplace. They're working from home, not just because they have to, but because they want to. Am I on the right slide here? All right, very good. So, lots of remote workers, people able to live where they want. What comes next? They are doing just that. They are migrating. They are deciding where they want to be, and it's not based simply on where an employer is located. As we know, and we heard about during the pandemic, and we're starting to see in some of our communities here, people do not necessarily want to be in the larger cities. You have those people who are always going to be in LA and San Francisco, but they're looking for other areas where they can live too while maintaining the jobs where they started. They want to avoid infection. They want to avoid crowds. And Indiana is perfectly poised for many reasons to get those people to come here. And as has already been mentioned, they come with jobs. So the number of adults that prefer city living is down 25%. More people are reporting that they would rather be in suburban environments. So lots of good news, right? Lots of people working from home come with a job. Lots of people willing to live in lots of different locations, absolutely in Indiana. So where's the problem? We know it. We know it every time we go out to eat, right? We know it when we walk into stores and stand in line longer. We don't have enough workers right now. We just don't. Suzanne Clark, who is the U.S. Chamber President, has been quoted saying, the worker shortage is a crisis. I think one of the best quotes here as you look through this line, 11 million job openings, only 6.5 unemployed. So you have people, they have jobs, you have people that want to relocate, but you've got to go find them. You've got to go recruit them. You can't count on them just coming to you. So we have an answer to that, but before we get to the answer, I don't know how many of you all remember this video, and I'm hoping that we can get this to play just because it's fun. If you've sat here thinking, okay, COVID changed a few things, not as big of a deal as you think, we're all going to go back, I would say if you don't believe the stats, then believe this cat, and if you haven't seen this, I'll tell you what it is in a minute. So can we play the video? Maybe? Okay. We're not going to see the video. How many of y'all saw this video when it happened? All right, like it just doesn't get old, right? I mean, here you have in southern Texas, a judge, two attorneys, all doing a conference, right? Who would have imagined that you were having these in-court experiences sitting from home and the one attorney can't get his filter off? That's him in the upper right-hand corner. So the whole time in this video, he is walking through his arguments and explaining, I'm really not a cat. I'm really not a cat. So anyway, we'll move on from that. So in this world of opportunity, Senate Enrolled Act 361, and specifically the portions I've cited just above, is a real key and a real opportunity for every person in this room and every community that's represented by you. It is its first of its kind economic development tool. If you saw in the materials, I represent the city of Fishers. They've been my client for about 13 years. And a lot of if you've been to Fishers, a lot of our development has really been focused on traditional economic development, vertical improvement, structures, jobs, lots of high-tech jobs. And that's all great. And you could be sitting there saying, well, that's really wonderful, but that's not really what we're looking to do where I'm from. But I would tell you, as great as things have been in Fishers, many times employers have come to me and said, well, we really need talent. We need this person. We need that. If you're offering me an incentive to build a building, what can you do to help me get the right people in place to work in that building, to serve in those jobs? And my answer for the last 13 years has been not a whole lot. The money's not there. And as you all know, we work in a very highly regulated industry, right? That's kind of what local government is. So we could go out and we could figure out how to structure some deals for training, but when it came to pure recruitment, there just wasn't a lot there. This bill, this law, changes the game. It does. It changes it for remote workers and bringing people in who already have jobs, like we've hit on a lot, but it also applies to the communities where you need people to serve in those brick and mortar buildings and to work where you already have structures. And let's say you're growing like crazy. You cannot grow, we all know this, without the talent to be in those places. So this is a bill focused on your number one resource, and that is finding the right people and the talent you need for your community. So what does it do? It enables your community to develop and implement marketing strategies. I think that's number one, right? Like we can get to the next several parts, but how many of you all have been on vacation and you've been maybe not to the beach or someplace that of course everyone loves, but you've been somewhere, maybe visiting family, and you love the community. But it's a community you've never even heard of before, but you get there and you like it and you think it's great. I think most of us have had that experience at some time, but you never heard of it before you went. Well, a lot of times, people just don't know. We don't know about what's outside of our world and our families. And this is an opportunity for your communities to put your best foot forward and tell people what is special about your community. Why is it great? Why should they want to live there? Is it the cost of living? Is it the great amenities? Is it the jobs? Is it your churches and your kids' programs? All of those things are probably true, but first and foremost, as you start thinking about these programs, I'm going to tell you how you can use money to market your community. Then you can use, after you've started marketing, people are getting interested, you've got to look at the talent that's out there. Who do you need? And I know that varies community from community. Is it someone who's a remote worker? I mean, how many people, let me back up and ask this question. How many people here have every person in talent that they need in their community? Right? Nobody. There's no community in the U.S. that wouldn't benefit from having that next person. Now, how you benefit is completely different. Again, is it in your businesses that already exist? Is it in bringing and having the opportunity to go lure more businesses? Because you can say, we have the workers, and to the extent we don't, we're going to help you find them. Or is it you need more people who are supporting your tax base, people who come with jobs, who are shopping in your stores, going to your restaurants, hiring your attorneys and bankers, coaching your Little League teams. This bill really does address every one of those situations, every one of them. So, first marketing, then evaluating, then who are you going to incent? Are you going to provide money to these people, and what does that look like? And, as I mentioned, it is a tool that can be used by all. So, let's do, again, a brief, and I do hit on the word brief, deep dive, because we all know there's money there, but it's often, again, going back to this concept of local government as a highly regulated business. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what dollars can be used for which project. So we all, in every community, we have a myriad of local funds. And this bill says, I think most directly, particularly this time of year, is this. You can appropriate money, put it in your budget. If your budget will accommodate it, go ahead, put it in your budget for this year, and then you have money for this program moving forward. Let's say you're not really thinking about it so much from a budget perspective, but you're sitting here saying, well, actually, I have X number of dollars sitting over in my engineering budget that's sitting there this year, or in my economic development. This bill allows you to pull from other appropriated and allocated sources to put that money into this program. It also allows you to go out and seek grants and donations. And I think you'll hear this from some of the other communities where this program's already been successful. I think this is really key because this is the piece that doesn't, particularly if you're using it to incentivize people to move, this is the piece that moves beyond, here are dollars from your municipality, to being able to tell the people you're recruiting, our community wants you, and we want you so bad that the local YMCA, for example, is going to give your family a membership because we don't want you just to move here. We want you to be a part of our community from the very outset. So don't forget about that piece because I think it's very important. That's kind of the wraparound piece that tells people we really want you, right? And then the last thing, and we talk about it a lot in Indiana, is tax increment revenue, so your TIF. You know, as many people in this room know, since the property changes, I don't even know the year now, you all probably know, it's 2016, maybe even before, TIF became much more difficult to really use. You had to connect it to the TIF district requirement, and it became very hard to use those funds unless you were using them for very specific purposes in very specific areas. This bill, again, is so different from others I've seen in that it frees up those dollars, not just your TIF dollars, but the legislation is really from other boards and commissions to also be used with this program. So if you have that type of money available, the law is very clear it can be used. I think this is kind of a really good point to stop and just acknowledge that this law is broad, it's very general language, it's pretty brief, there's not a lot of different sections, it gives you a lot of authority, but I sure don't want to fail to recognize that I get, and I hope you all consider, I'm sure you will, or you wouldn't be in this room today, not only are your needs as a community different, but the political ramifications of how you present your community, the money you use, and how you use it are also equally different, right? Like, I totally get some of this money that I'm talking about, you're like, there's no way I would ever be able to use that, and I get it. Because just because the legislature says you can doesn't mean that that's the most feasible solution for you. So also, too, I don't want to do a complete deep dive into every category because the legislation is so broad that sometimes it's easier to talk about what you can't use than even what you can. But I'm going to be here all day, and if you have specific questions or thoughts or you need some more ideas on what's available, we'll be sure to connect because I want to help you as much as I can without trying to give everybody an answer that you can take home when I know every solution does not fit for every person in this room. So again, I think the easiest and most direct is, again, appropriating money in this year's budget. But think about all these other accounts that are available. And again, they're listed in the statute, and the statute is in the materials you were provided this morning. What if you're sitting here and you're saying, okay, Jennifer, that's all great. I can use any money I have. That's all wonderful, except for I don't have any money, right? Fair enough, fair enough. One other source of funds that you may want to think about that I know many communities are still sitting on in Indiana, which is wonderful, is your ARPA funds. So as many of you know, there was a $10 million almost standard deduction for how you use those funds. And if you choose to use the funds or apply the standard deduction to your ARPA funds, you can then put that money into your budget for what's essentially defined by the Treasury as governmental services. Pretty broad, right? So if you're saying, my engineering fund's already at zero and it's sure not December yet, if you're thinking about your economic development fund, whatever it is, think about how some of those funds can be replenished with your ARPA and then money taken out that you could potentially use for this program if you think that's good for your community. And again, glad to talk about this at length with anybody who has questions later. So again, hitting on the standard allowance, and then again, using as essentially a function of, we all know money is fungible, right? Putting money in, taking it for your governmental services, taking out money that could be used for this program. Because I would caution you, I think if you want to take money directly from your ARPA funds to put it in a program like this, I would really encourage you to seek additional advice, because I can't quite get there for you. But I think easily it can go in as an accounting function and come back out from another fund. So we also hit on grants and donations. And again, just to encourage you, while the money may not be great, the sentiment it brings from your community that you really want people is fantastic, so don't forget about that. So, what cannot be used? And it's really this. It's anything that you have that is for, the language is restricted purpose. Well, okay, so what's a restricted purpose? That's a great question, and it's not answered by definition in the statute. So I think when you start thinking about your restricted purpose money, you can't use accounts that receive bond proceeds. And you all know this is essentially a codification of SEC law. If you go out and borrow money, you have to use that money for the purpose that you said you were going to use it for. So your bond proceeds are not available. Police and fire pension. No one here was ever sitting here thinking, oh, my police and fire pension would be great for that. Of course you weren't. This is just to confirm you are correct. It is not a good use of that. Highway motor vehicle fund, that's off limits too. Debt service, like your wastewater. Limited purpose state and federal grants that you may receive for roads. One that I always think about is the money many communities receive when they take in drugs off the street. That type of money is not available. And then I think you also have to think, of course, what's politically not available in your community, what would be very tough for you if you tried to move it to a program like this, and then other funds that you've otherwise contractually obligated. My first thought on that is that does go back to your TIF. If you've taken tax increment from an area and you have pledged it to a specific purpose for a developer, for example, you can't really then take that money. It's contractually obligated. You can't really take that money and put it in a recruitment program. So, okay, we've talked about a lot of different sources of revenue. I'm going to stop right there. And are there any questions that I can take or any comments anyone has? Yes. I am so sorry, but I cannot. Perfect, okay.
Where can we find a list of the ARPA grant recipients and the amounts?
So I can get you that information. A lot of it's available on the federal website from the Treasury, but there is also some great writing that's been done. And let me get your name and contact information, and we'll get you some more materials on ARPA. Yes. Can we?
Hi, I'm Rupal Thanawala. And one of the questions I have been asked a lot, because I'm a president for Asian American community and work with Recorder also on the tech I write on tech topics. One of the real questions I hear a lot, especially when we are trying to attract more tech talent to Indiana, is how welcoming and diverse our communities are. And I think that is a very critical factor. I know there are lots of people from different municipalities and all here and cities because often, like I literally rally that question all the time. Random executive recruiter will call me up and they say, hey, I want, my folks are trying to relocate. And often I don't have a very good answer. Whether it's not representative of the workforce here, or we are not telling our story better. Or the third one is we are not engaging our minority community, and we are not taking them in the fold.
I love that question. I love that question for many reasons. And I think it's so important because if we're sitting here and we're super honest, some communities have an awesome story to tell about that, and we're probably not telling it very well. And others don't necessarily have the same story. And hey, that's natural, right? That's okay. But I think it is figuring out, like, again, who does your community really need? What are the jobs available, or where do you see voids in your community that could be solved or at least helped if you brought in certain remote workers? So you got to start there and figure out what you want. And then, to this very point, you have to figure out, okay, we know we need a lot more high-tech. We need people living in our community who bring jobs with them that are very high-tech. Where are you going to go get them? You've got to start telling the stories about your community, but you got to tell them effectively, right? Like billboards on the side of the interstate probably ain't going to get the job done, if we're being honest. You've got to go out and seek these people by having the exact information you're talking about. Because if you're seeking a lot of minorities, you're going to want to be able to tell them specifically, or you're trying to seek jobs that are filled often by high-tech people that may be more minorities. You want to be able to effectively communicate what you're bringing to the table. And I think it's why this marketing piece is so very important. So thank you. Okay, let's move on to transferring funds. We'll go through this pretty quickly because you all know it. It really is about exactly the same as how you always transfer funds. So if you're going through the budget process, you get this as a line item and you start this into your appropriation. If you have money sitting in a fund, you know that your fiscal body helped move that money to that fund, so they're also going to have to be a part of bringing it out. So you will need to consult with them and have them approved by resolution moving the funds. As you also know, some of these funds may not fall within their restricted purpose, so they're not off limits, but some funds, you have to go through your typical process of providing notice if you're doing additional appropriations. So always think about that. And then also with TIF and funds of other boards and commissions, although I will tell you, I keep going back to TIF because I think that's where a lot of funds sit, but I also think this, I was trying to think of other boards and commissions that are sitting on pots of money, and there typically are not that many. So I would start there, but if you're going to move money from a board or commission like your redevelopment commission is going to have to approve that transfer. So the transfer process into the fund is just the same as what you're used to dealing as you move funds around for any purpose within your municipality. So now who are you going to recruit? The bill is specific in this, and you have to think about what you need, but the good news is we're not going to cannibalize, right? That's good. So Indy's not going to try to take somebody from Fort Wayne and vice versa, because you've got to go look for out-of-state workers. And they really fall into three categories. It is the remote worker who is employed out of state, willing to move to Indiana, but their employer is in San Francisco or Chicago or New York or wherever they are. It's the Indiana college grad who is from out of state, but you want to go start recruiting at these universities for their top out-of-state students. And then lastly, it is people simply living out of state. It is an out-of-state person who is willing to work and come to your unit to work for an employer located in your unit. So we have hit on this several times, but think about what you need. Do you need a greater residential population? And you're going to hear a lot later about the financial benefits that come from remote workers, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But it is those basic things, and again, you're going to have the data later, but do you need people that come with a job that are just living and becoming parts of your community? Traditional brick and mortar businesses, do you need to hire people now? Is your community going gangbusters, but yet you know that because all of America is going to face a worker crisis, you're not going to be able to continue to develop unless you have the talent available to corporations you're bringing to your community? Or is it really simply a combination of both? And again, if there is one thing I just want you all to leave with today, this law applies to everyone. Like, no one raised their hands when I said you have everybody you need, every piece of talent. And if you can't answer that question in the affirmative, then this law is just terrific for your community. It really is. So now, how do you set up this program? Pretty easy. It is a resolution or executive order by the executive. So I think that is, again, a very good political point to think about. Are you in a community where people are going to respond well and be excited about this program because your executive says, this is what we're doing, let's go? If you are, terrific. And in fact, you have an executive order template in your packet of materials today. But if you are in a community that it's better to have a little more feedback, you probably want this adopted by resolution, whether it's your physical body or your Board of Public Works, depending on how you operate. If the first step is taken, the physical officer of the unit shall create the fund. No question. That's the word, shall. And then the executive administers the fund in coordination with a fund board. So the fund board of managers, you need 5 people. This is a very executive-heavy piece of legislation because all 5 people are appointed by the mayor. Now, the law is not specific in that it says they serve at the pleasure of the mayor, but as you know, for some of your boards and commissions, there has to be cause to remove people, and that's not in this bill either. So I would suggest to you they do serve at the pleasure of the mayor. He appointed them, he can remove them. She appointed them, she can remove them, whoever your mayor is. You have 2 ways of doing this, and again, I provided just a template document that may be helpful to you. But you've got to treat it essentially almost like a corporation. It won't be a distinct legal entity, but you do need bylaws or some other governing materials for how this board's going to operate. So in your bylaws, you're going to want to set and talk about when the meetings occur. Back to where we started, identify appropriate incentives if your community is going to offer incentives, develop and implement marketing strategies, identify, recruit applicants, establish the process if people are going to apply for incentives, and then enter into agreements with the applicants, the talent that you select. So I would suggest, as you're looking at that, you're probably thinking, who are the 5 people in our community who are going to be super well suited to go out and deliver on all this? And maybe you have those people, and that's great if you do. I would also suggest that is probably where somebody like MakeMyMove comes in, because they probably have the expertise that, no offense to any community in here, I know they have the expertise, but no offense to anyone here, that you may not have in your community to create a comprehensive marketing program that's targeted to go get the exact type of talent that you've decided you need. So anyway, you can also, of course, hire people to help complete these functions. So if I had takeaways for today, it'd be this. This is very broad, truly home rule legislation. It really is up to you. It's up to you to decide how you're going to use it, who you're going to seek, how you're going to fund it, and what your board's going to do. It can be used with a myriad of resources, and I just would say to you, I feel pretty confident and bullish on this. If you believe you don't have resources, come talk to me. Please come talk to me or get my contact information, because we will help you find resources that you can use. And it does have to be developed to fit your community. Again, understanding every community in here is a little bit different. But then focus on your marketing, your recruitment, and then finally, your incentives that you're willing to offer. So as I mentioned, if you open your packets now or later, you're going to have some template documents in there. They may work for you. What I can tell you is this: they cover the law. That's what they do. That's about all they do. But you will be able to establish the programs using some of the documents you have if you're interested, and they follow the law. They probably don't fit your community perfectly. So if you have questions about how you take those documents, you all have local counsel. I would be glad to work with them and help them to the extent you're interested. Because again, I think if there's any key takeaways today, it is truly this: great law, all-encompassing, will help you find money, help you move it the way that's best for you. But also don't forget, you do need this. You need this because you need people, and the competition's only going to get harder, and this bill will help you find those people. It will if you have the right team together. So I want to allow a little bit of time for questions.
All right. Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm from Bloomington and had two questions. One is, what is the form of the incentives that can apply under this law? And then the other was on Section 11, which talks about graduates from Indiana colleges, and was wondering what creative ways you've seen college communities leverage something like this for their communities.
Great questions. Let's start with the incentive packages. Again, not just to sound like a broken record. And I mean, like, how hard is it to believe? Like, I'm super excited about this bill because we talk a lot about home rule, and sometimes our laws don't necessarily reflect that, but this bill does, in that you can decide what are the incentives that you need to get people. And I think that's really where you have to look to experts like MakeMyMove too. Like, there's two pieces of that. What are you selling? Three pieces. What are you selling? Who are you selling it to? And then, like, what's the most advantageous nexus between those two, right? Because it's great to say, okay, I'm in Bloomington and it's great, you're going to love it, but you know, are you appealing to somebody who only wants to live at the beach, right? You got to figure those things out, and then what are you giving them that really will move the needle on bringing them to your community? And it's totally up to you to decide. You can decide and help create the programs that will work best for your community. And I wish I had one answer. I can't tell you what I've been asked for over the years that I've never really been able to give people, but this is a small one, right? But it's super. We moved back from DC in June. It is expensive to move. It is super, super, super expensive. One of the number one incentives I've been asked for over the years that people care about are moving expenses. They want to be able to pay that, and we never had a way to do that. But if that helps you get people to Bloomington, that would be one option. I think other things you want to look at, I think I would always look at child care when you're talking about families. How do you incent people with child care? How do you incent people with perhaps whatever they need, particularly when focused on the remote worker, for a home office, right? Like all the things that people need in their daily lives that fit your community. And then again, I can't say enough about the grants and donations, because I think it does two things. I think it has something that you can offer people, but it also tells those people this isn't just about money. This is about our community really, really wanting you here. So I would look at all those. And then as far as working with college towns, everybody in a college town, everybody outside of a college town knows you've got one of the greatest resources available, right? Like, it's fun, people like it, and you have a ready-made community already there. And how you get those people to stay, I don't know that I have a super specific answer, but I think you have to first decide on who are those out-of-state graduates coming to Bloomington that most fill your needs. Like, what's going on in Bloomington? What group of people is it? And then you have to decide how you go and seek them. But I have met so many college students at a myriad of different colleges who I remember, a University of Tennessee grad, who moved to Indiana for a job out of law school. If I would have had the same job opportunity in Knoxville, I wouldn't be standing here today, for sure. I just wouldn't. And there was no opportunity, of course, at that point to work remotely in the way you can today. So I think in college towns, there's a ton of different opportunities for everyone. But first look and see, who are the people, who are our graduates that would give the most to this community if we could get them? And then go from there and decide what you're offering. That was long. Anyone else? I'll try to be briefer.
I found as a challenge over the last year and a half has been broadband, especially when it comes to recruiting workers and people in general to the community. In most of my county, we struggle to obtain 10 megabits per second downstream and 2 megabits per second upstream. Is there any provision in this to shift funds into building out synchronous gigabit in rural settings? Because one of the things I've found myself saying over and over again since the beginning of 2020 is rural broadband deployment is as important now as rural electrification was in the early 20th century.
So the question about broadband, I think that I would not say that there's something directly in this piece of legislation that is super helpful to you on broadband, but there's some other things that we should talk about that you could do with infrastructure packages that may be very helpful under other state statutes if we could help you find the money. Because you're right, it is very hard. It's hard to go recruit a remote worker if they can't sit and have really great internet access. So that's a great question, but there's certainly other statutes where we can help you with that. Anyone else? Okay, as I mentioned, I'm going to stick around today. If you have questions, if you want to push on anything I've said, if you want to know about different funds, if you want to get more specific later offline about some different funds that you can look at, I want to be available to help you. So thank you for your time.